It's time for the Maximum PC No BS podcast, episode 240 for the week of August 20th, 2015. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the GTX 950, Windows 10 privacy concerns, and more. So all that is coming up right now. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Jimmy Thing, and joining me are Associate Editor Alex Campbell.
Hello.
Editor-in-Chief Tuan Nguyen.
Hello.
And Senior Editor Jared Walton.
Hello.
And Jared, you recently put up a review of the newly released GTX 950 this morning, Nvidia's new budget card. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It was a really long week.
Okay.
So we got the card last week. IDF's been going on this week, and of course, the NDA time was this morning. So I basically was finishing up after IDF last night. But the cards, I mean, it's the new $150 card. We'll have to see what actual street prices hit. NVIDIA is saying it's $159 MSRP. The overclocked cards are going to be more than that, which kind of puts it in this interesting position of, like, the GTX 960 is now on sale for as little as, I think, $180. So it's really kind of a tight pricing thing. But the card itself is fine. If you've got an older card, GTX 650 was the one that NVIDIA's was plugging as a great upgrade option for 950. It's pretty darn close to 3 times faster than the 650.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
Now, bear in mind, the 750 Ti is almost twice as fast as a 650. So, you know, if you've already got a 750 Ti, it's not like this huge upgrade from there. But it's, you know, it's that mainstream $150 price point. The 750 Ti, incidentally, will not go away. It's their Maxwell 1.0 card that's now at $120 instead of $150. So they're keeping that around because it is their sub 75 watt card that doesn't technically require a PCI Express power adapter.
Mm-hmm. Just off the PCIe.
Yeah. But the ironic thing is most of the 750 Ti cards out right now have a power adapter because they allow overclocking. And they're like, well, you might need more than 75 watts if you overclock. So it's just kind of anyway. So the 950 is a 90 watt card, so it needs the PCI Express adapter, 6-pin. I guess I should probably pull out the cards. Let's take a look at them.
Oh, you brought them. Awesome. So if you're watching this on the YouTubes.
On the videos, yeah.
This is the old 650, if you're wondering.
Yeah.
Tested that. Mini HDMI, no display port. That kind
Two
of sucked.
DVIs, right.
I really wanted display port because the display I was using was display port. So, you know, it was good in its day, but 3 years later, it's gotten pretty rough to game on. Now this, we got twins here. So if you can't tell, one of these is the 960, one of them's the 950. The one with the 4 heat pipes is the 960. The one with the 2 heat pipes is the 950.
For those who can't see, he's holding up 2 Asus Strix cards that are about the same dimensions, both with the black and red, covers and the Strix heat sinks all over them.
Yeah, and the 960 also has a metal back plate. I don't know if it really helps that much, but, you know, it's a little nicer looking. And then check out this one. I got to hold on to the EVGA so that you can see the size.
And this is the 950 you're showing here?
Yeah, so this
Jesus.
is like a 950 card, and this is supposed to be kind of a budget card. I mean, like, it's basically...
What is that, like an inch? Like 2 inches?
Yeah, it's like
longer?
2 inches longer than the Strix, and I mean it's a solid 10 and a half inch heatsink. It's basically the same size as the 980 Ti EVGA card.
Yeah, it's a very big card.
It almost looks exactly the same visually, and it's only got 2 fans for those who can't see, and it's got copper heat pipes with, you know, the same type of heat spreaders and heat sinks that the 980 Ti has got sporting on the side. So it looks very, very similar.
Now, how much does this card cost?
I don't have the pricing from EVGA on hand, but I think it was like one. So EVGA has 4 models of the 950. They've got the stock clock, which will be 159. Then there's like I don't know the order, but there's like a super clock that's a little bit overclocked and it's 169. Then there's like a higher overclock that's 179, and then like the uber overclocked edition that's 189.
Now it's interesting because we were talking about it this morning. That sort of gets into the 960 territory.
Right. So an
And-
overclock 950 will actually outperform a stock clock 960.
But then you can overclock that 960. Though.
Right.
So
So-
it seems very odd.
Yep. And then the factory overclock 960s, of course, they'll push the price up into the $230 range. So
Okay.
I mean, there's this huge range of SKUs from factory overclock to not, but even the non-factory overclock cards, they all generally will overclock 15 to 25%. And so, there's not as huge of a difference. It's just like, do you want to go to the trouble of overclocking yourself, or do you want someone to do it for you and guarantee it? So, I personally generally lean towards the ones that aren't heavily overclocked from the factory because they're cheaper, and I'm a bit of a cheapskate.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, so performance-wise, they're a solid card at 1080p, high quality, ultra quality with 4xAA. It works, but it will struggle with some titles that are more demanding, it's kind of what we expected. Like, there's no real shock. It's the same core, the same GPU architecture, the GM206 that's used in the 960. They've just disabled 2 of the functional units, 2 of the streaming multiprocessors, and so cut the number of CUDA cores from 1024 down to 768.
So in terms of like a real world gaming experience, I'm guessing this is a card that's really good for 1080p, probably very high to max settings for most games.
Yeah, so I mean, you'll definitely have to juggle the max settings thing depending on the game. Some games it will run max settings without difficulty. Other games, I'm trying to think what the Witcher 3 was a pretty punishing game. I think that was one of the lowest running games, and it was hovering right around 30 frames per second with 4xAA, and it's like, no, it's not 4xAA. It's procedural AA. So you might need to drop down some of the titles a little bit. But in general, the difference between ultra and very high quality is usually pretty slight because it's just...
You mean from a visual perspective?
Yeah, like
Okay.
the texture quality is dropped 1 notch, but most of the time the maximum quality textures are overkill.
Okay.
For those who can't see, all the cards that Jared held up use, I guess, add-in board partner fans that aren't blower types. They're spreader types, which I'm not a particular fan of because they
Was
don't
that a
really...
pun?
Yeah.
They don't
They don't
exhaust
exhaust the heat out of your chassis. They kind of just spread it around. And if you're running SLI, that becomes a problem, I think.
That's when you need really good airflow from that front fan
Yeah.
and a good exhaust fan in the rear to really get all that air move out of your case.
Right. And I think blower type fans do a better job.
Yeah, but no one's going to do blowers on these level of cards.
I know.
So, I mean, pretty much that ship has sailed. The blowers, you'll still see them on like the GTX 980 Ti's, and of course Titan X is a blower, and FureX has its closed loop cooler. So those all exhaust heat. But the mainstream entry level cards are, well, the main thing is the blowers tend to be a little noisier and harder to deal with that noise, and they want to look good on the noise measurements that some sites benchmark. And so it's easier to do a dual fan, open cooler, and be quiet, but it's worse for SLI. Yeah.
And then you gave the cards an 85 rating, so it is a good card, right? Would you recommend this to 650 users or?
Oh yeah,
Not
yeah.
so.
Like if you're still hanging on to 650, man, I feel for you. I feel your pain because even at like high quality, a lot of the games were dipping below 30 frames per second, well below in some cases, and games like Witcher 3, I'm not even sure you can play those at all without dropping down to like 1600 by 900 or lower resolutions. So yeah, I mean, threefold increase in performance is huge for a $150 game, a $150 GPU. And one of the interesting things that Nvidia kind of pointed this out, and I think it bears mentioning for PC gaming master race here. If you're looking at like, oh well, why not just get a game console? If you have any moderate computer, which most of us have, but you'd have to have a desktop, obviously. Throwing in a GTX 950 is basically the equivalent of the PlayStation 4 GPU.
I'm surprised it's not more.
I mean, it varies, right? So in some cases it is more. In other cases, it might be slightly less. PlayStation 4 is going to be heavier optimized.
They're still struggling to run at 1080p, 60, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some of their games are even at 720, 30 even.
Right.
At least on Xbox, anyways.
Yeah. So I mean, it probably is more powerful than the PlayStation 4, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. It depends on what the game code does.
Optimization and things like that.
But it's like, so if you're one of those people who hears that argument like, oh, PC gaming's so expensive, it's like, no, that's a load of crap. Here's a $150 card. It will turn a $300 moderate, office PC into a gaming PC that will legitimately handle 1080p.
Right. PC games also are a lot cheaper too. So.
Yeah.
You also went to IDF this past week. Was there anything interesting that you saw there? I know Intel was talking a little bit more about Skylake and sort of talking about the architecture and all that stuff.
It was all about the Internet of Things. No, I mean, like it's interesting. Like the keynote was all about IoT, and it was like it wasn't that great. The keynote, it just kind of dragged on, and but then later on they did some sessions on Skylake, so that was more interesting. The big questions we all had were what exactly has changed on Skylake's architecture, because this is a tick. So Broadwell was effectively the same architecture, minor tweaks as Haswell, but with a process shrink from 22 nanometer to 14 nanometer. So Skylake is now your new architecture on 14 nanometer, and initial testing aside, when I retested and had more mature firmware, Skylake is clock for clock 10 to 15% faster than Haswell. So it's like, well, that's pretty good for equivalent clock speeds. So we were all like wondering, what did they do? The big thing, I mean, obviously they increased buffer sizes. The reorder buffer is a bit larger. There's just more of the usual stuff in the buffering section. But what I asked about, and I was kind of surprised, I said, well, you say in one of your slides that the front end is wider. How wide did you go? So from Core 2 Duo all the way up to Haswell and Broadwell, they had a 4-wide front end fetching 4 micro-ops from the micro-op cache and decoding those. And then they could dispatch up to 6 micro-ops with Haswell. They could dispatch up to 4 prior to Haswell. And so then I said, did you go 5 wide? And they said, actually, we went 6 wide on the micro-op fetch and decode. So that's a 50% increase. They didn't tell us about their execution units, but we know if they went wider, they had to add more execution resources, and they haven't disclosed that. So obviously there's changes to the architecture, but when you add all of those up, you're like, wow, it's 50% wider front end, but it's still only 10 to 15% faster at equivalent clocks. And that just shows how hard it is now to really get these massive increases in performance out of the CPU. You can add more cores, and if you've got a heavily threaded application, then you can benefit. But for a lot of stuff, multi-threading and such is not really going to show huge benefits. And so they go back to all of these optimizations to basically extract more parallelism from the code and make it run faster. And you could double your resources and you might only get like a 10% increase.
So do programs need to be optimized to take advantage of this new architecture then?
Yeah, I would assume so. There are some new instructions as well, but I think they were mostly security related. There was like called SGX, Intel Safeguard. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up, but I don't think there were any like critical, AVX type updates. And the code, I mean, their pipeline's probably pretty similar to Broadwell still and Haswell still. So I don't think you're going to have to heavily modified code to make it run faster on Skylake, but there might be a few tweaks that you could do.
Okay. So this past week, I've been playing around with Windows 10 a little bit. Installed it on one of the laptops here, and I know Alex, you've been sort of delving into it recently, and there's a lot of concern about Windows 10, like privacy issues and things like that.
Right.
And you recently wrote a story on that, right? Can you
Right.
tell us a little bit
And the
about
most recent issue that we just put out for production, I wrote a column, an open source column about Windows 10 and the Microsoft privacy policy, which a lot of people don't read.
What is that? Sorry, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's our Windows sponsorship.
Yes, this is.
Yeah, we're Microsoft
Jared,
Pocket.
for those that are just listening, Jared was busting out his little Windows shirt with like 4 versions of
I got it from
Windows
IDF.
icons. Oh, okay, gotcha. Interesting. IDF, huh? I guess Microsoft had a.
Yeah, they're there.
Okay. of course.
So I looked into it because there were a few stories I saw circulating on the internet, and there were a lot of people, of course, our readers had been commenting on Facebook, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's basically an NSA spy tool," you know. So part of that, you're always going to have the the fringe who's going to be the a little bit of the paranoid type. But just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching you, I guess.
There is a monster under your bed.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you gonna attempt to defend Microsoft?
Oh no, that's not where I'm going.
But the money hats, what are you doing?
but so
goes my
I
pay
decided
raise.
to actually read the privacy statement because I saw these stories saying that there's some nefarious stuff in there. So I'm like, okay, let me read it myself, with my own eyes and do my own analysis. So, whenever you install Windows, by running Windows 10, you're agreeing you're agreeing to their terms of service, which includes this privacy policy. So I can read bits of it right here. It says, personal data we collect. Microsoft collects data to operate efficiently, provide you with the best experience with our services. Provide some of this data directly, such as when you create a Microsoft account, submit a search query to Bing, speak a voice command to Cortana, upload a document to OneDrive, or contact us for support. We get some of it by recording how you interact with our services, for example, using technologies like cookies and receiving error reports or usage data from software, yada, yada, yada. A lot of this is kind of expected. If you use any service from anybody, whether it's Google, Bing, Yahoo, they're collecting data on you. Amazon, every order you have, everything, every click you make, they are tracking what you're doing in order to advertise to you. So that's not necessarily nefarious in and of itself. In this day and age, people are kind of used to having their information collected.
Well, I mean,
whether or not we like it, it's kind of de facto the way things are.
If you use a smartphone, that's essentially an always connected device.
Right.
And for most things to work well on the smartphone, it needs to communicate
Exactly.
with home. And if you just think of your computer as, an extension of that, then it's not really that bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are wanting their computers to deliver more information faster. If you ask a question, you want an answer, but it has to connect somewhere to get that answer. So, unless you don't want your computer to do much, then, this is the way it's going.
So I read over this part. I'm like, okay, it seems like a lot, but most places you go, whether it's Google, almost any service you're using, they're going to be collecting some sort of usage data in order to provide you the service, right? So how they use the personal data, let's see. So they use your data for different things like providing the services, to improve their services, for safety, security, and dispute resolution. So they make sure they can protect or detect and prevent fraud, things like that. But here's the fun part, is like the reasons we share personal data. All right. So finally, we will access, disclose, and preserve personal data, including your content, such as the content of your emails, other private communications, or files in private folders, when we have good faith and belief that doing so is necessary to 1, comply with applicable law, or respond to valid legal process, including from law enforcement or other government agencies. That means a subpoena, any subpoena. 2, protect our customers, for example, to prevent spam or attempts to defraud users or services. So that's legitimate, okay. 3, operate or maintain security of our services, including prevent, stop, or an attack on our computer systems. that's reasonable as well. To protect the rights or property of Microsoft, including enforcing the terms of governing the use of services. However, if we receive information indicating that someone is using our services to traffic in stolen intellectual or physical property of Microsoft, we will not inspect a computer's or a customer's private content ourselves, but we may refer the matter to law enforcement. So if you're pirating stuff, they'll call the police on you and use your personal data to convict you. Now, the real fun part is that, if you log in with a Microsoft account, you basically are creating things like a OneDrive account where they store a lot of your login data. That's how your login data is shared, is, some of your stuff stored on OneDrive. But what really, really got me, the biggest part of this, is that under the Windows header of the privacy statement and the security and safety features subheading, there's a section on device encryption. And this is really interesting. It says device encryption helps protect the data stored on your device by encrypting it using BitLocker drive encryption technology. When device encryption is on, Windows automatically encrypts the drive Windows is installed on and generates a recovery key. Here's the fun part. The BitLocker recovery key for your device is automatically backed up online in your Microsoft OneDrive account. So your backup key that keeps all of your stuff encrypted is backed up to Microsoft servers that they have themselves said that they can share with anyone they want, essentially, that they can give to law enforcement if they want to comply with law enforcement. And if it's in the interest of preserving Microsoft's property or profits, basically, they can give your encryption keys away. So basically, it turns BitLocker into a useless piece of cryptography equipment, because if you're trusting your key to someone who can just give it away to whoever they want, pretty much, without telling you, then what is the point? So to me, that's basically, I can't recommend someone use Windows 10 and BitLocker together. And it cannot in good faith do that because of the way they're treating the backup key. The backup key is basically, if for any reason you are, say, political dissident, right, or you've done something that you want to protect your data, you have a right to privacy. There's a big privacy issue. If you're concerned about encrypting your data, if you use BitLocker to do it, the law enforcement agencies can still basically subpoena Microsoft for your OneDrive account, grab that key, and all they have to do is seize your machine, and they've got everything. So this is where basically at the end of my column I said, this is a good idea. If you really want device encryption, it's a good idea to look into TrueCrypt, which was abandoned, I think, last year. I can't remember when it was abandoned, but there's been an audit going on, and the audit actually found that TrueCrypt's code is actually really good, that there are a few, minor holes in it, but they're really edge use cases. So by and large, TrueCrypt is still a piece of software that a lot of cryptographers say, it's good. There's no structural, problems with TrueCrypt, and it's an open source piece of software, so anyone can look at the code, and anyone can run it. There's no charge for it, so there's really no reason to use Microsoft's BitLocker. And if you use it, you're basically, since the federal government recently has been so against cryptography, they've been asking for this front door access to cryptography. They came down to a conference here in Silicon Valley, and it was RSA. They came down to the RSA conference. There's an NSA or there's a Homeland Security office here in Silicon Valley as well, and they basically went to RSA and they said, we don't want to have to break cryptography. We don't want to break into it. Please, developers, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, give us keys so we have front door access, so we don't have to break the software. But if they have, it's basically giving letting the wolf into the chicken coop, basically.
We don't want to break your software. Will you please break it for us?
Yeah, it's basically like, oh, well, we don't want to break it, but we want access to it. And it's like, no, you're one of the people we're trying to keep out. And, the the great arrogance of all of this is that the government is trying to keep everyone else from using cryptography, and they can't even protect their own frickin' data, right? Office of Personnel Management, hacked. IRS, hacked. The damn Pentagon, freaking hacked. It's like, fix your own shit, then come talk to us. Like, get your own shit in order. You clearly don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Very passionate about this subject.
So it's basically like, oh, you don't want anyone to have encryption because are you afraid that you don't know how to use it? Are you afraid that, oh, the world will end because people have secrets? People have always had secrets. So I think that, good old-fashioned, good policing and things like that can get around a lot of the things that, how many criminals that you're bringing in are using encryption? Like, there are other ways to catch people. You can catch people in the act doing things. You can catch them on the street. You can't encrypt every action you do. You can only encrypt electronic things. So, I don't know. I think this move by Microsoft on their their privacy policy, and they're basically giving law enforcement, it's like, hey, here's everyone's encryption keys. They think they're safe because anyone who doesn't know better would just back up using BitLocker because it's built in, it's free. When you right click, it's like encrypt this folder, it's using BitLocker. Right?
So the takeaway is if you're going to use Windows 10, don't use BitLocker.
Right. I would steer clear of BitLocker. I would also be careful about what Windows services you choose to use. Understandably, just like if you use Google, anything else, you're submitting data to that company so that they can provide a service. The thing is that you have to weigh whether or not either government intrusion or government subpoenas or advertising or how they use that data in their privacy policy. Are you okay with them using your data? And a lot of people just click okay. I think everyone in this room has just been like, okay. Oh, you want my firstborn child? Here you go. I don't care. Okay. Right? So I think users should really think a lot more about what they're giving away with privacy policies. It's one of the things that, open source and free software people have always cried about. It's like, you're giving away your freedom in order to have this thing, and there are alternatives to this particular product. The one exception I think that everyone would argue for Windows is like, well, in Linux you don't have DirectX 12. So for DirectX 12 you're basically selling away all your freedom in exchange for DirectX 12. So that's a choice you have to make. How much does your freedom actually matter to you, and is DirectX 12 and pretty graphics really worth it? Some people it is. Some people it isn't. And it depends. If you have a machine that's just for games that you're not going to have any personal data on, maybe it's fine. It depends on usage case, depends on the individual, depends on what you value. So,
Alex dropping some life pro tips in the podcast.
Yeah.
Do you still think we're sponsored by Microsoft? Readers.
Called you out.
Speaking of Microsoft, another thing that I wanted to talk about was the fact that this morning Microsoft, I guess it was revealed that Surface Pro 4 is coming in October. Microsoft has had a pretty rough start when it came to the initial release of the Surface, but after I guess a couple of years, they said they've been doing pretty well there. Most of their revenue, or a large part of the revenue, has been coming from the Surface line. I still haven't seen one in the wild myself, and I take the train every day, so I'm not really sure. And I live in the Silicon Valley, so I'm not really sure who's buying these. The refresh will probably come with i5 and i7 Skylake variants, and of course, ship with Windows 10, which Alex is a big fan of. Have you guys used the Surface, and what do you guys think about the form factor? Are you guys excited about Surface 4?
I haven't used a Surface. The tablet I've had was actually a Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1, which actually...
This is Android, right?
Yeah, it was an Android tablet with the S Pen, and it was like the first generation one, which was, interesting, and I've got my own issues with that. But the idea of getting work done on a tablet form factor that's super portable is actually fairly nice for students if you don't want to carry around a whole laptop, because sometimes that's inconvenient. If you have a stylus that you can actually take notes with, or you can tap on the screen, and it's less intrusive, or you can, just use it as a tablet and read a textbook while you take notes or something. There's value there. I can see that. So I haven't personally used a Surface, though, so I can't argue about performance, and the idea of running a desktop OS on a tablet form factor kind of makes me think, well, how well is it really going to work? Because I haven't used Windows on it, so I don't know if Jared has.
I mean, my thing is, like, all the hybrid devices, these 2-in-1 devices, they are always better at one or the other. So you either get like a hybrid laptop that is a better laptop and kind of a so-so tablet, or in the case of the Surface Pro, I really feel it's a better tablet and a so-so laptop. Like the touchpad thing, the type cover, it works as a keyboard. It's better than typing on the screen, but there's no way you're going to convince me that it's better than actually typing on a laptop with a keyboard, because the screen doesn't have hinges. It's not really something you can sit on your lap. It's good for setting on a table. It works in that way. But, and I actually have seen 2 people over the past few years that own Surface Pros.
You live in Washington.
No,
that's
but you
Microsoft.
also you're
that's Microsoft.
You're
country.
also I mean that's true, but I mean it's fair. You're also a tech editor too, so like tech journalists don't count if you're counting those guys.
I can't remember who it was, honestly. I think one of them was like a non-techie person. Someone I know from church or whatever had one. I was like, oh wow, you've actually got a Surface Pro.
Yeah,
like
that's what
I
I would
remember
say, too.
actually saying that, and
Yeah, I would say that too.
and there's a loyal following for Surface Pro. And again, I live up in Washington, so maybe there's a Microsoft influence where people are just like, we got to support Microsoft. But it's probably the best of the tablet first hybrid devices for running Windows. And then you just got to answer that question. Do you want a tablet first hybrid device to run Windows? And I mean, I use an Android tablet when I'm taking notes and such in scenarios where I don't want to carry around a laptop. For getting work done, I've almost never tried to do anything on a tablet. My smartphone is kind of that, if you need to do a few little things, you can use your smartphone. Mm-hmm. If you need to do real work, image editing, writing an article, whatever, I'm always going to a laptop or a desktop.
Right.
But performance-wise, I mean, the Surface Pro is, we've reached that fast enough era. Just about everything is fast enough for office work.
Sure.
So, it's not really a problem of performance. It's not necessarily fast enough for all the latest and greatest games, but it's fast enough for everything else. Now, I should go back to that GTX 950 thing. Nvidia did show one thing that was pretty cool. It's a new feature coming in GeForce Experience called Game Stream, and they've had various iterations of streaming games stuff going on, but the new Game Stream that they're going to come out with, I believe next month is their plan for the GeForce Experience update. It will allow you to send an invite to another user, and that user will get that in an email, and they open it up, and right now they've got a Chrome browser extension, and so if you open it up in Chrome, and what it effectively does is it connects you to a live stream of someone else's gaming session. So you can help them out with a game, offer advice. If they're really stuck, you can actually take control.
What is the name of the extension?
I don't know what the name is, but
Okay. Is it out yet, or
I
is
don't
it
believe so, because it requires the GeForce Experience update. So that's coming officially in September. But they showed this, they demoed it with Trine 3, so not like the most demanding of games, but they sent themselves, a request and basically gave me the controller and said, play this. And so it was streaming a 720p video stream over the network, and it wasn't like the local network. It was actually going over, the standard internet network. And it was low latency and it worked well. And, they had an Xbox controller, so I'm playing it. And he says, now, check this out. And so he goes in, basically he turns on co-op mode. And so there we are playing from a single PC co-op, but I'm playing off of a video stream and he's playing at the PC. And it's supposed to work over the web. And that effectively means that you could connect to your own PC potentially and play your own games with any device that's capable of handling the video decode, which means Ultrabooks and,
high-end Chromebooks.
Yeah, high-end
Yeah,
Chromebooks
that's
might
true.
even
I
do
didn't
it,
think
right?
about
So,
that, yeah.
I mean, it's a Chrome extension. So, I mean, this is kind of cool. It's like it's the Nvidia Shield tablet had that game stream feature as well, but I never really used it, even though I've got the Shield tablet. I'm like, if I want to hook something up to my HD TV, I'll just bring a real computer or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is this interesting idea. Like, hey, we may have just killed off the need for discrete graphics in all laptops. I mean,
that's
but
only for playing with. I mean, they're basically showing off their play with a friend feature, right? It's not
Right.
supposed to be a replacement for a fat client per se.
Right. But I mean, like you could basically say, well, I want to play on my laptop at work, and it has no GPU other than the Intel GPU, and if you connect to your home system, you could potentially just game that way. And it's not like being in front of the computer, but if it works well, I mean, it's a
Okay.
pretty cool concept. So it will be interesting to see what that looks like next fall.
So
Or,
it's
I mean,
it's
next
kind of
month.
like Valve's in-home streaming service, except that you don't have to be at home.
Right.
Okay, so that's actually pretty interesting. And the remote computer doesn't have to have the game or GeForce experience?
No, the remote computer needs to have an Nvidia GTX processor, and it's got to have GeForce experience installed. Oh, the remote.
The
You're
remote,
right.
not the host.
Yeah, the host computer needs a GeForce GTX computer and game GeForce experience, and then they need to enable game stream. But the remote computer, as far as I can tell, it doesn't need Nvidia anything.
Okay, just the Chrome browser and the extension, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right.
And they said it will work. They used an Xbox controller, but they said they will have it working with mouse and keyboard. So again, knock on wood. I hope it all works properly and that it works with pretty much everything. They said for security reasons, if the game crashes or exits or whatever, they close down the remote control. So like you can't take over the desktop, but
Can't alt tab out.
yeah,
and-
you can't alt tab and be like, oh, sweet, I've got access. But, so it's in beta or internal beta, and it should be going open beta in September.
I wonder if game devs will have an issue with this, because now, let's say I'm playing a game called Rocket League. It's, soccer with cars, 4 players. So now, essentially, theoretically, you could have 2 people playing the game on 2 computers from 1 copy of the game, right? Are the developers of Rocket League going to have an issue with that? And could you scale it up to 4 people? So then that's potentially 3 lost copies sold.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's always that, anyone who really, like, if you get your game out there, and this is the whole, like, drive behind free to play and stuff, they're like, hey, we'll give them the hook. We'll give them that first taste, and then people will like it. And they'll be like, man, I'm just going to go buy that for myself. And so I think Game Stream will be, like, it's not fully going to replace gaming on a good system, because there will be probably some slight latency.
720p.
I don't know what the video stream is capable of. Like, they had it on 720p, but I think they will support 1080p. But it's still you're encoding it and streaming it, and so there's going to be some it's not the same quality as sitting in front of a high-end PC and gaming. But if it's good enough to get people a taste, and then some of them will be like, yeah, that's a sweet game. I want to try that.
Yeah, true. All right, moving on to reader questions. We've talked a lot about Nvidia, and Ken Mittelholtz from Facebook asks, can you guys talk about the state of AMD? There's a report out there saying that their market share has dropped. They have come back before. Do you guys think it will happen again? This is
a lot of speculation, really.
There's a lot of speculation. I met with AMD this past week. They're always around IDF as well. They're not at IDF, but they're nearby. And we talked about things. I mean, they're not. Everyone knows their Zen processors coming next year. We can all
the high-end CPU.
Yeah, this will be. Well, it will be. It would make sense for it to be in everything. It's their new architecture. The first major change since they went to the bulldozer stuff way back in the day. And so this will be, it will be in CPUs and APUs. They haven't necessarily said whether there will be CPUs with no graphics or not. I mean, Intel has their Enthusiast platform that doesn't have graphics, but all the mainstream LGA 1150, 1151, 1155, they all have integrated graphics on the chips now. So, I mean, we might see everything from AMD will have integrated graphics as well. It would kind of make sense. But we don't know anything about the architecture. We just know it's coming sometime next year. And I mean, I got to say, like, this is kind of make or break as far as I'm concerned for AMD. Like, if this doesn't succeed in a good fashion, like, I don't know where they go next. But at the same time, I'm like, well, DirectX 12 is potentially making CPU performance less important for gaming, and so, you know, they could still hang on and just do graphics. So then you've got the graphics side, and I would say AMD is still more competitive on graphics, but they've definitely given up a lot of market share. I think Bitcoin actually kind of hurt initially, but long term, I mean,
It helped them initially,
helped
yeah.
initially and hurt long term AMD, because like we saw this massive price spike in AMD
Yeah,
GPUs.
the Hawaii GPUs, 290s and 290Xs.
And what that meant is gamers weren't buying AMD GPUs.
They couldn't, right? They're
You know,
sold
it was
out.
Bitcoin farms. And suddenly it's like, so all your graphics cards went to these Bitcoin farms, and now, you know, that's kind of scaled off and you've lost
People
market
have moved
share.
on to Nvidia in the
Yeah.
meantime. Okay.
So, I mean, you know, there's never is a long time, and I don't think that we can say that they're down and out or anything. They can certainly bounce back, but it's going to all come down to execution and doing the right things. And I mean, they had the not Starswarm. Starswarm was the prequel. They had Ashes of the Singularity.
The DX12 benchmark.
Yeah, it's
on
your
Windows.
first like real game benchmark. It's currently in, what do you want to call it, like a pre-beta, but it's supposed to be going open beta to the early access people who pre-ordered it in the next week or two, as I understand it. So I mean, that's as close as you can get to an actual shipping DX12 game. AMD is running faster on it than Nvidia, but there's a whole lot of politics behind that question. It's like, did Nvidia intentionally not help optimize the DX12 code for their architecture? And you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with DX12. Like, from my perspective, it looks like the game developers have to do more work in order to make it run well on AMD and Nvidia and their different architectures within those companies. And so I think a lot of game devs aren't going to be able to do all of it. So you'll end up getting like, oh, well, we optimized more for AMD, and sorry, Nvidia's stuff didn't run as well. And other devs will be like, hey, we optimized more for Nvidia. Sorry, AMD stuff might not run as well. So it could be a bit messy. And the solution is going to be like Nvidia and AMD need to go and really get in with the game developers and help all of them. So hopefully that happens with Ashes before it actually ships, and Nvidia does what they need to do there. But
Yeah.
I think the other thing with AMD is that they have to, as we saw with like the Fury X launch, like that was a flubbed launch. Like that
You
was
still can't get those cards now, right?
And you still can't get it. And there, I think it was just they have to work on their product launches and making sure they're a nice, clean launch where they have, where you know, the people who are actually making the cards, like Asus or MSI, whoever, actually have cards in stock so that people can actually buy them. It doesn't make any sense to launch a product, say, oh, this is a launch, this is our new product, and no one, including press, can get them.
Yeah.
You know, we had, you know, one, and it, you know, you have to, it takes, you know, giving them your firstborn child in order to get one, and then they want it back.
I gave them my firstborn child. They still didn't give me a card. So I
Yeah.
thought that
So,
was pretty messed up.
exactly. So it's in order to
Jimmy
really,
Jr., I miss you. No, just kidding.
you know, in order to really come back in the marketplace in terms of a market sense, you know, product launches are really really important.
I think
you know.
my theory with that was, I mean, they revealed the Fury X because they didn't want to be overshadowed by the 980 Ti, which is a beast card.
Yeah. It's a really nice
But
card.
the problem there is NVIDIA actually had cards.
yeah, and I mean, like, you look at the naming, Fury X was clearly designed to trump Titan X, and then Nvidia kind of went, screw you guys, we're going to launch first with a cheaper card that will undercut what you guys were going to do and suddenly make it less relevant. And Nvidia's, I mean, it's cutthroat. It is so cutthroat in the graphics industry, but you know, that's their job. They're a business. Their job is not to help the underdog. Their job is to make money. And so if Nvidia has a better product and is winning, you know, it's up to AMD to improve.
At the same time, though, no, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I was just thinking. I mean, I don't know if it would be in AMD's best interest to stop trying to play catch up or chase the Nvidia card and just focus on things they do well and just really just do their own thing, and so they can do a well launch. Don't let, in the military, you never let the enemy dictate your movement, your momentum. The minute you do that, you lose. Right? So AMD's letting Nvidia dictate their momentum, their releases. If they just say, no, we're going to do it this way, we're going to have it on this date, if Nvidia does something great else, fine, that's their business. We got to make sure that we do our business and we do it right. We can't rush things. We can't be forced into something because we feel like there's not enough time or that we're going to be overshadowed. You just got to really focus on that. So there may be something to that. I could be completely wrong. I don't have an MBA, so.
And no, I'm not saying that AMD is going to go, bankrupt or anything like that anytime soon. But is it, to go back to Jared's last statement, is it in NVIDIA's best interest to wipe AMD off the market? And same goes with Intel. Is it sort of,
No.
Does NVIDIA and Intel have to worry about anti-competitive measures at that point then?
There's always that concern. The interesting thing is, it's hard to make processors faster on the CPU side, and so there's that question, like, is Intel slowing down because it's harder, or is Intel slowing down because, like, there's no serious competition from AMD or really anyone else for the high-performance processors? Well, the biggest competition Intel faces now, and this is why IDF is talking about Internet of Things, is,
Mobile
ARM
chips.
and Samsung and these mobile chips. And so I think Intel is pretty scared of them, and the graphics cards, the PC space, the graphics guys are also worried about them. So that's why Nvidia has this Tegra line that they're working on. And so Nvidia doesn't want to kill AMD off. Nvidia just wants to be
to beat them to a pulp.
they just want to make a lot of money and have people buy them. So it's like they're probably analyzing things at some level and saying, what would happen if AMD actually really started going away, and people would be like, oh well, that gets really worrisome. We do not want to kill them. We just want to have them be less than us.
We don't want to kill them in the ring. We just want to win the fight.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on to a different question. Maybe this is a better question for Tuan. I can speak about it a little bit. But David Edgar asks, when is the forum coming back? And I know, I kind of fought to keep it for a long time, but
He was wearing an Edgar suit.
the forums were a lot more trouble than they were worth. Maybe Tuan, you want to talk about that a little bit?
So, long story short is the forums are unlikely to be returning for a couple of reasons. And this thing is the same thing that happened when PC Gamer did their new web launch too. For some of you that might not know, PC Gamer and Maximum PC are part of the same company. So we all moved to the same platform, and when we did the transition for Maximum PC, the web development team did analysis on our forum and basically concluded that it was just overrun with trolls and spam and stuff, and we don't have enough live staff to kind of curate that part of the site. So it became just a big headache for us. So
there was also a lot of maintenance costs and server costs.
Yes.
You'd crash the site and things like that.
Yeah, the benefits didn't really outweigh the cons. Actually, not just for us, the staff, but for the readers as well. So we decided to just kind of shut that down. Then move everything over to Discuss. And I think with Discuss, you can follow conversations much easier because the system allows you to track everything that you respond to and whoever responds to you. And you can also participate with other sites that use Discuss as well. But the forums at this stage is unlikely to come back. It might in the future, never say never, but for now, it's not live.
Right. I think one of the, I used to post there, somewhat, not as much as I should have, but, sometimes readers would post there and have questions, and then somebody else would come in and help them out, with the build question or something like that. With Discuss, you don't really have that. So I don't know, maybe we set up like a subreddit or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think a subreddit would probably be a good move. I'm a big fan of IRC, so if I can set up an IRC box somewhere to run a server, if IT will let me do that, I'd be happy to do that.
Or you can just post questions in the comments on the articles where it's relevant. And,
That's true.
I see all the stuff that's commented on my articles. Discus gives you that little bubble that says, hey, there's a new comment or a reply or someone upvoted you. So it's like I track that daily, many times a day. So I'm like, people.
And you've even replied to stuff on my articles.
I do.
Yes, and my articles.
and other stuff. So Jared is reading comment. We do read comments. We do read the Facebook comments. The good ones and the bad ones, and even if they're negative comments, we do kind of take them to heart. We investigate them, and try our best to fix them, given our workload.
Yeah, if you need help, like by all means, just send an email or whatever. It's like we'll work to help you out. But I mean, if you're just talking to be heard, which is kind of what forums end up often being, you get all these people that they're talking over each other, they're shouting each other down, and it's like, I mean, from a business sense, it's hard to monetize that, it's hard to control it, and it ends up being a huge time sink. And
But we're not in this for flame wars. We're in it to actually help people and try to get try to be as right as possible, try to be as helpful as possible, not to call one another an idiot, not to insult one another, not to belittle someone who may be new, not to do anything negative, trying to keep it positive. It is all community here. We're trying to help each other out.
Yeah, and I think we also have I'm trying to remember what the email address was, but I think it was like either letters at MaximumPC.com or comments at MaximumPC.com. You can sort of send us your questions that way. We often answer them in the magazine, but we can think about posting them on the website as well.
We do get letters, and sometimes we base build-its off of letters and comments we get in. People say, "Oh, well, what about this or this?" Like, "Oh, that's a really good idea. Let's see if we can build that."
Yeah.
Fun
fact: we also get, in case you guys didn't know, we also get a lot of prison mail, which is it's pretty. I think Alex was learning that the other day, and
Alex has a new best friend.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we get letters from everybody. We do have a physical mail address, so you can. I think that's on our website. You can look it up at the contact.
I'm not going to say it here, but
but I mean, we don't want to get any packages with powder in them or anything.
Right.
But I mean, we do get letters. We read them. We don't have time to answer every comment or letter we get, but we do our best to read them and consider them. So you are heard. Trust me.
Speaking of Reddit questions, moving on to Twitter, Angry Aaron at Ranyarts asks, I want to get my kids a Steam machine. Do I build one or purchase? What do you recommend? This is a complicated question.
I think it depends entirely on what games you're planning to play on Steam. If you're going to be playing a lot of the indie, like arcade games, the hardware is not going to be very demanding. And you could even convert an old PC and run most of those really well on there. Integrated Intel graphics are still, I think they're still the number one GPU on Steam.
It is.
It outnumbers pretty much everything else. So you can run a lot of the, the lower end games.
There's a bunch of awesome indie games.
Yeah, there's
on Steam
a lot of awesome.
The controller.
Yeah, there's a lot of awesome little arcade style, side scrollers, RPG, Japanese style RPGs, all those little fun indie games. They're, most of them are pretty good for kids because they're not, overly violent. They don't have, some of them have pretty safe themes. Some of them don't. Some of the dating games are a little disturbing.
I'm very opinionated about Steam machines.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah, so Tuan, used to work for iBuyPower, and Tuan worked on the Steam machine. It's just divisions over there, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about your thoughts on Steam machine?
Well, Valve made this whole hoopla about how Steam machines and the whole Steam OS platform.
I sense a bitterness here.
Yeah. Well, I think not only for the partners that participated in this, but I think the community as a whole saw this from the beginning as the F4, because you could just build a Windows. I'm sorry, I mentioned Windows again.
No, that just means more money in my pocket.
It's basically, so I'm going to spend an extra $100 so I can play a game that costs $60. So instead of paying a $60 game, I'm going to pay $160.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense to me because that is cheaper, apparently.
Let's not get into that.
So the idea, the original idea was to move away from the Microsoft platform and all the overhead, and it was a good one, But really, you could just run all your current games, Steam games or not, on Windows. But if you ran Steam OS, you can only play games made for Steam OS, which is, I mean, that's
Linux games.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge
Alex is
downgrade.
like, what's wrong with that? No.
But yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of, top tier titles that aren't necessarily published on Steam, or
On Linux,
made
you
for
mean.
Steam OS either, and they're
Yeah.
mostly for Windows games. So that kind of hype and excitement just like fizzled out fairly quickly. So I would just either build your own gaming Windows box or not. I wouldn't build a Steam OS gaming machine. That's not really
I mean, if you have a spare computer and you want to just
experiment. I would call that
experiment, yeah.
an experimentation.
Alex has been experimenting with SteamOS, right?
Well, not with SteamOS, since SteamOS is based on Debian. I'm actually running tests right now, running benchmarks where I'm taking an Nvidia GPU, which is a 980, and then I'm going to take a R9 Fury, which is somewhat. I'm trying to get as close to apples as possible, but I'm not comparing performance between Nvidia and AMD. That's not the goal here. The goal is I'm running through a number of games in OpenGL mode, so trying to avoid the DirectX API as much as possible, and running these same benchmarks in Linux and the same games in Linux, and then using different drivers. So I'm going to test the open source drivers versus the proprietary drivers, so we can actually say, okay, here's what we know we can get with these settings in Windows. What's it going to look like in Linux in terms of frame per second? How much of a hit are you going to get? Because things like BioShock Infinite found out that it's actually using DirectX. It's written for DirectX 11. But the Linux version for SteamOS is actually, it has a translation layer that converts all the DirectX directives into OpenGL. And instantly I'm like, aha, I'm going to see performance hit because that's processor overhead. That's GPU overhead. If you've got to take instructions from one set and convert it into another set of instructions, that's going to take time. So seeing how much that actually hurts performance for some of the nicer titles that are available on Steam, I think is going to be I think that's going to be a little enlightening to see. Oh, well, if I build a Steam machine, am I really going to get all my money's worth out of this graphics card versus just building a Windows box?
Going back to that SteamOS question, I mean, like, my perspective is SteamOS was always a long-term play by Valve. Mm-hmm. They're looking at the entire market. You've got Apple with the App Store for their iOS stuff. You've got Android with the Google Play Store for their Android stuff. And Microsoft with the Microsoft Store for whatever else. And I think
so you can have a Facebook app for your desktop.
Right. So I think Valve was maybe, like, Steam has really become a platform for games. And there's other platforms, and Electronic Arts has their
Origin,
which
Ubisoft has Uplay.
Origin got renamed again, didn't it?
Did it?
Yes.
I honestly
recently.
never use it.
It's
so.
getting renamed, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But as just a side fact, so Chris Roberts of what's his
Star
company?
Citizen?
Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Wing Commander.
He really dislikes Origin and EA. So if you play Star Citizen, there's a mode in there it's called like it's EA, but it's called Electronics something as a mock towards EA, and there's like an Origin like system in there as in the game
nice.
as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, anyway, going back to what I was saying, like, Valve has so many titles coming onto Steam. They make money off of it. I mean, like, when was the last time Valve released a new game?
Is it like Portal 2?
It's been a while. Left 4 Dead 2, Portal 2, like, anyway.
No, Dota.
Half-Life
Dota.
episodes.
Yeah.
Or
Episodes 1 and 2?
Counter-Strike.
Oh, yeah,
Counter-Strike Go.
Yeah.
Which is actually just like an old game that they kind of updated, but...
Yeah. Anyway, they're making a ton of money off of Steam, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And when they see Windows Store and Microsoft starts talking about, like, hey, you're going to get all your stuff through the Windows Store, what does that mean to Steam? And that's like a huge concern. And Microsoft has since pretty much backed away from forcing people to get stuff through the store. But if they ever should choose to go that route, I think Valve and others need an escape clause. They're like,
Yes,
what do we do next? And there's
Especially
also
as the end of life for Windows 7 will roll around,
yeah.
and people are going to be forced into 8.1 and Windows 10, and Microsoft's pushing really hard to get everyone on 10. So if they
I wonder why.
if they go back to the Microsoft Store methodology of distributing, that
I
they're
think
going to have everyone on 10, and it's going to be there.
I think they've abandoned that though. They don't have the leverage there. I mean, their
But
Windows
they
Store
might
is
in 5
pathetic.
years.
Yeah,
right?
they might.
I mean, who knows? So it's
Doubt it.
yeah. Well, I think the bigger risk, like long term, is like, does Windows remain the dominant platform? I mean, Android and iOS, like, we're in a world now where, like, 10 years ago, everything was Windows and a minority was Apple. And now it's like everything is everything. You've got so many smartphones and tablets and such. And as those continue to improve in performance and features and all that stuff, where do you go next? And so it's an answer it's a question with no real answer that everyone's trying to figure out. And so I think SteamOS was partly like Valve's going, let's see where we might go, and let's have something on the back burner that we can work on. I mean, Steam, when it launched way back in whatever year it was, I don't remember, the
Half-Life 2 era, right?
yeah, I mean that's like early 2000s or something, or late 90s,
99, something like that. Yeah.
But
Half-Life 1, I don't remember.
it was a rough launch, and I remember people hated Steam, and they were like, "Steam is the biggest piece of crap."
was
and
big.
I hated Steam.
DRM, and
DRM,
bloatware.
yeah, it was the original.
And
big
it's
gaming
like,
DRM.
here we are now. I'm like, I love Steam. I've got everything on Steam, and so where things go in the future is really tough to predict. And having no plans for an alternative OS might be a bad thing for Valve. They're making so much money off their Steam cash cow. They need to have.
And especially if they can offer a discount for the same title offered on Steam OS.
They should, but they don't.
They don't. Maybe they're waiting for for developers to compile their games for Steam OS.
Maybe Valve should compile their games for Steam OS. They've got a few, but like
most of like the core, like Orange Box and Team Fortress 2 and a lot of their core games are actually available with Steam OS. But I think there's a couple outliers like Left 4 Dead. No, I think Left 4 Dead 2 is on Steam OS.
Left 4 Dead
not
2,
original.
and then like Alien Swarm. That's another game. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
They have, I mean, most of their games are on Steam OS, but they do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not a good example if not all your titles are on.
Yeah.
on Linux.
The thing about Steam OS is that it's the idea is for it to be seamless. It's supposed to be the idea is to have more of the Xbox type experience for a gaming PC.
Or like a good living room experience.
Right, a living room experience. I mean, you have the Steam controller, the Steam Link, so you can have your PC sitting in another room. It's not this big thing in front of your TV, and you've got this nice, sleek little box that you stream to, and you can play all your games there. I mean, to me, it's kind of elegant. The fact that developers don't write for Linux is basically, and it boils down to one thing, which is DirectX. If developers want DirectX, they have to go with the Windows platform. The minute you say, we can do it with OpenGL, then it becomes a lot easier to deploy it on Linux and for Mac. So
Why'd you?
because so I mean, the minute you drop the adherence to DirectX has got this and this, if you develop for something else, then it becomes a lot easier. So I think part of the sell of SteamOS is trying to sell OpenGL or translation layers so that you're not tied to the DirectX API. The minute you can break developers away from the DirectX API is the minute that's going to be the same moment that SteamOS starts to win, because there's really no advantage to me having Windows now. There's really none, because if I can play all my games, I don't need DirectX. I already know that. I can do all my Office and my work stuff on free version software or Google Docs or whatever. And as long as there's no other critical piece of software that's running on Windows, and games are the number one thing that hold most users back from switching to a Linux operating system, because say, because I can't play my AAA title on Linux, it won't run, it won't work. If it's not written in DirectX and it's written and it does work on Linux, it weakens Microsoft's position. So that's part of the reason I think DirectX 12 is such a big deal, is because it's half the selling point of Windows 10.
Sure.
To me on an objective standpoint, I'm saying, okay, it doesn't do a whole lot more than 8.1, but it does have DirectX 12. That's its key selling point because a lot of people are mad at Windows. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm switching to Linux." We have a lot of our commenters actually like uninstall Windows, switch to Linux. That's how you make Windows 10 faster. So, yeah, we're reading your comments. So, I think that DirectX is kind of like what's keeping people on the Windows platform. It's really the one thing. There's no other.
It's the biggest piece of the pie.
No, I'd say convenience is the big thing. Like people don't like change. I mean, maybe teenagers and 20-somethings, it's not as big of a deal. Even 30-somethings to a degree. But I'm the youngest of a lot of kids, and I've got lots of people that I help, friends and family that are older. And I mean, like they're all just like, you try and convert them from Windows XP to Windows 7. There was pushback. I've got people asking me now, hey, should I install Windows 10? And I know these people. I'm like, look, you're 60 years old and you don't like change. You're going to be freaked out for the first month of using Windows 10 just because it looks different. And I mean, if I can't get them to go from Windows 7 to Windows 10, which isn't like a huge upheaval, I'm like, there's no way on earth I'm going to convince these people to go to Linux.
Well, to be fair, I mean,
like the techie people will do Linux. I could do Linux. It's not a big deal. I can do OS 10 or whatever. But for the non-technical, they're like, no, we are set in our ways. We do not live for computers. We live for our families and other stuff. So.
Well, in that sense, it's actually easy to convert people if they're not doing a whole lot of gaming and they don't have specific pieces of software they're tied to. For instance, my fiance, when I first met her, she had a Mac, like a MacBook, old MacBook, tied to Mac. When we got her new laptop, she finally got a new laptop. She got an MSI gaming PC running Windows 8.1. Right, so that was a big change. And just the other day, I gave her a laptop for her to take to work, a much lighter laptop because the MSI is a big, hefty, gaming PC. It's like a desktop replacement. It's not really a work laptop. So I gave her a laptop to work with, and I installed Ubuntu GNOME on it. And she's somehow been able to do her work on it without very much tutorials from me. She's been able to figure it out. So,
but did she like it more?
I don't know if she liked it more. She says it's fine. She doesn't really complain. She called me this morning and said, "Oh, how to install Python? Oh, this is how you do it. And if you can't find it in this Ubuntu Software Center, I can tell you the text command to do it."
The day one of my family members asks me how to install Python is the day I die. I'll be like, "What?"
Well, she's learning Python, so
that's why she's techie.
She's not. She's techie-ish. She's not that techie. Like she's not gonna dive into the Windows registry on her own. She can install stuff, but she knows enough to get herself in trouble, and then I have to, bail things out. I'm like, it's running slow. It's like, what did you install? You installed something. I didn't install something. No, you installed something. I did. I just installed this thing. There it is.
We actually have time for one more question before we have to.
All right.
Okay.
Last one.
Okay, we got it.
Will you review Acer's XR341 G-Sync monitor? And I guess, how do you guys feel about curved monitors?
Ooh.
I've been using it for the week. So
Is that the one? Is that the one?
Yeah,
that's the one we got in. Yeah.
Okay.
So I came in from Washington for the week for some meetings and such, and I saw the box for the Acer. I'm like, oh, sweet, there's that 34-inch ultra-widescreen Acer. So I promptly unpacked it and hooked it up. And, here's the thing is I had a 34-inch at home, but it's a 2560 by 1080, and I really didn't like the limited vertical resolution. So I'm going to the Acer's 3440 by 1440. I'm like, excellent. And so I plugged it in, and the curved aspect is like, I don't really care. It's not bad. Like I don't sit there and go, oh, I hate the curve. But at the same time, I'm not going, oh man, I wish all screens were curved. It is what it is. It looks pretty cool. Moving it around is a little bit of a pain though, like the stand and such. But the display looks really nice. It's eye catching, and that it is that there's a change with ultra wide where you're just like, oh my gosh, this thing is like, my arms are about 3 feet wide right now. It's really wide, and you're like, I actually have to turn my head left and right to look at the screen. It's like having two 1280 by 1024 screens from the old days next to each other, but no bezel in between. So I think the monitor looks really cool, and My biggest complaint is if you're gaming, there's a lot of games that don't have native knowledge of the 21:9 aspect ratio. And so you end up having to mess around with either INI files or registry settings or whatever to try and get it to look right. Hopefully that will change, but I mean, it's a niche market. I don't think there's a ton of people that are like, I really want 21:9 aspect ratio, but the display itself looks really cool. It's FreeSync. So, if you've got an AMD card, that's great. If you don't have an AMD card, you can just run it at 75 hertz at its native resolution. So that's fine too, better than 60 hertz at least. So, I mean, thumbs up to the display overall, but then there's that $1,100 price tag. And I'm like, yeah, there's probably a lot of other displays I'd take before I spend $1,100.
In all aspects, I've seen you look. I've been coming over because I'm like, oh, it's been sitting on my desk for review, and we haven't gotten to it because we were busy with Dream Machine and other things. So it's been sitting there waiting. And when you finally unpacked it, I'm like, oh, it actually looks a really nice screen, and looking at it and kind of peeking over your shoulder, I'm like, oh, it's actually by all means a nice display. Seems to be responding really quickly. Doesn't seem to have any real problems. But the curve, like you said, is like, I don't know if that's gimmicky or it feels a little gimmicky.
It looks cool. It's the cool thing.
It looks cool. It does look.
I think it makes sense for a monitor that's like 21:9 aspect.
Yeah,
because you don't have to turn your head as much, right?
Yeah, like I was saying, if you have if you're used to like a 2-monitor setup and they're not directly in front of you, like one slightly to the side, it's kind of awkward to kind of look at one and then turn and then look at the other one. So this is kind of like, it eases it a little bit, and I can see that if you're going to go even wider, so if you're going to go like another panel
like
worth,
180,
almost like a 180, and you actually have it a single panel, like that actually, I can see where the value would come in, but for this size, it's kind of like it's not really needed. I'm on the fence. I'm like, you really need that, or is it?
We need to measure the arc of it and figure out how many it would take to make a full circle around you.
We should do 3 of those monitors in surround.
That'd be awesome.
Dream Machine idea. There you go.
All right, we have another meeting to run off to, so I'm going to close it up right now. So that about wraps it up. You can check us out online at www.maximumpc.com. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on Google Play, iTunes, Kindle, Nook, and Zinio on behalf of the Maximum PC crew. Thank you for listening.